My big question is, do you think or do you know if Tim Cook watches this show? Because if he watches it, I'm going to get to keep seeing it for a long time.
I know he's seen it, and I know he does like it. I couldn't tell you where he is and how much he's kept up with it, but I know he is a fan of the show. I do know that.
I know I wish you were making all the decisions about how long we're on the air.
Yeah.
Yes, my decisions would be yes. You definitely would want me making the decisions. So we know that Star Trek exists in For All Mankind. You have a nice little moment with in season 2. My big question, of course, is does Battlestar Galactica exist in For All Mankind?
I think it probably does. I think Glenn Larson probably still made the original Battlestar Galactica, and I don't know if it might have kept going further because I kind of felt that because there was so much interest in space and that there was a space mania even bigger than what we remember going on in the 70s and the 80s, that show might have continued. I think Star Trek Phase 2 probably actually happened in the mid 70s, and I think there was probably a big boom in pop culture and space projects.
Wait, can I ask you a question here? Sorry, I'm taking over this interview. What did Ron Moore do in the For All Mankind alternate history?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I probably would have really tried to stay in the Navy and become an astronaut, which is really what I wanted to do. And I was afraid that my math skills were going to be would not have made it. I might have buckled down if it had been more of a real thing.
Oh, that's great. For fans of the show, I hate asking the generic thing, but what do you want to tease people about season 2?
Well, it's the Cold War, in the military, and that becomes a big part of the story in season 2. We're in the 80s. It's the Reagan era. The competition with the Soviet Union really heats up, and the confrontation with the Soviet Union happens not just on Earth, but in space and on the moon itself. So that's really what season 2 is about.
And I also would add that I think the relationships that we've come to know and love have changed, and they've evolved, and we'll see kind of new sides of those relationships as we go over season 2.
One of the things about this series is that there are so many places you could tell the story, and you have all these characters and locations. What is it like trying to figure out where you want to actually spend your time? Because, there's so many choices.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work in the writer's room to figure all that out because we could take the story in so many different directions, and we have a fairly fairly large cast that's getting bigger all the time. So you really have to sort of pick and choose where you're going to spend time, and it changes and evolves. The course that we set out at the beginning of the season often changes as we realize we don't have enough time to do everything that we set out to do. So we have to sort of make sacrifices or make changes in the plot and the stories to just kind of get it down to its fighting weight and do the best show that we can.
When you're making season 2, are you starting to think about, okay, well, we might get 5 years. We better figure out where we're ultimately going, and how much is it we're sort of taking it season by season?
Well, from the beginning, we decided that we had to map out the whole thing because the nature of the show was so intricate, and you're dealing with history and timelines and how certain events are going to happen, and we wanted to roll it out in a specific way so that we could see the progression of the space program over the course of decades. So we actually mapped out the whole journey way back before the beginning of season 1, and we're trying to sort of keep to that schedule, which we have done more or less. Everything kind of changes within the margins, but the big goalposts and the big ideas of what's going to happen have remained the same.
Also, I think like with any show, once you get to know your actors better and also you see how characters resonate, I think that always does kind of influence how you move ahead.
Well, one of the things about this series for me is that it's starting at the beginning, and it's clear that you guys, as you've said, you have a place you're going. But do you already know what season would introduce a starship?
Basically.
We're not going to tell you.
It's not soon.
Of course, I'm just curious if that's come up in the writer's room, and because season 2 sort of is touching on the advancement of what you guys are doing with NASA, and I'm just curious, if that's even come up.
Well, we do talk about the show being this is the road that takes you to Star Trek. Like this is how you could get there, and this is probably what some version of this happened in the Star Trek backstory, where mankind went much more aggressively into space than we did in reality, and there was technological advancement, and there was cultural change, and societies change, and the world starts coming together, and there's sort of a generalized path that takes you to starships in some future like Star Trek. And so this show is sort of trying to say, well, this is basically how you kind of get there.
Do you guys envision, I mean, the first, from season 1 to season 2 is about a 10-year jump. Do you envision that each season will do like a time jump and you'll use the seasons to do that?
That's the basic concept, is like each year, each season we would jump roughly a decade or so ahead. So that, because at the outset we wanted to see how the space program could develop, and that takes time. If we had just set the show in the 70s, you had never gotten out of the Apollo Skylab era. So we wanted to really see the space program expand and have really lofty ambitions, so that required a much bigger time frame. And then part of the fun of that is seeing how your characters change in 10-year jumps, and kids grow into adults, and adults age out of the program, and there's a churn of cast of characters, and that's part of the fun of the show.
One of the things I loved about the first season is that you have an after the credits scene at the end of episode 10. Is that something that you're planning on continuing each season, like a little tease of what's to come?
We might not always do a post-credit sequence, but we're always going to probably tease, what's the next jump at some point towards the end.
I love all your questions because they're very, you obviously are very detail-oriented in the show. You ask all the questions we're not quite sure if we can answer.
Yeah.
Right. I apologize. The last time I have to wrap, but the last time I interviewed the director of WandaVision, and he felt like he was at a deposition. And I'm like, listen, I'm just a fan, and I want to know things. So, I mean, what can I say?
I love it.
I got to go. I'm just going to say congrats. I'm really a huge fan of the series. And
Thanks.
when I finally get to see episode 10, I would love to do a follow-up and actually talk about the specifics.
Awesome.
Listen, have a great day. Thank you so much.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.